You might be a person who is struggling to figure out how to keep your marriage or relationship afloat, living in an environment that is inconsistent, with impossible communication, with a partner who is emotionally up and down with no predictability. See, adult survivors of childhood abandonment and complex trauma are all around us, and you might be in a relationship with one of them. Theirs is a sad reality shrouded in the darkness of shame that keeps their experience locked away, only to be known by their volcanic overreactions or quiet avoidance that are triggered by simple everyday stressors. They are sisters, fathers, spouses, family to us. They live fenced in by crippling fear and a loss of identity stolen at such a young age. They've developed and matured, as we all do, driven by survival and attachment, the same instincts they came into the world with, the same instincts that gave them a fighting chance at survival. However, the other component necessary for reaching potential, the social environment, was not favorable. It seemed as if this third ingredient almost wanted their destruction from the very beginning, as if they were not meant to be alive in the first place. This environment, or soil, if you will, would go on to nurture beliefs deep in the psyche of the individual. And these beliefs would go on to be infused with the person's sense of self. And so they would live out those beliefs as if they had to. They would live out those beliefs in ever reinforcing and destructive consequences. And those consequences reinforce a worldview that is dark and a sense of self value that is worthless. They live in a reality that holds no possibility for hope. Each day they walk past choice and opportunity only to choose what is familiar, only to choose hopelessness. The pain of watching a loved one continue down this path is traumatizing in itself, especially when they're taking out their pain on you. For the caregiver, the parent, or spouse, this constant replay of self-sabotage that makes no sense to the naked eye is common sense to the individual that has lived through a childhood that simply didn't meet their needs. We can only see what we've been trained to see and hear what we've been trained to hear, and in some sense feel the way we were trained to feel. The complex trauma survivor with abandonment issues is trained to feel pain and experience a reality that brings on the familiar continuation of pain. Virginia Satir, a famed family therapist, stated that even more than survival, the greatest human drive is familiarity. People in general will seek what is familiar even to their own demise. We tend to live very unaware of these unconscious processes and cycles that power our lives and dictate our so-called choices. Even as success in a relationship begins to take root, the need to self-sabotage will kick in to steal any reward. And in spite of this pattern, the survivor makes the effort every day to courageously climb the mountain that they keep falling down from. Despair is inevitable. Inside of them continues the drive to attach and feel the security of unconditional love so necessary to human existence. But then the reality of trauma kicks in, letting them close, but not allowing them to grab on to the love that is right in front of them. The love that they've been desperate to receive for their whole lives. Being married to a complex trauma survivor is like driving a car that's out of alignment. The car is constantly pulling in a direction that inevitably wants to drive off the road. Being married to this person requires a constant hold on the wheel in order to avoid the destruction of the survivor and ultimately the relationship and everyone else in the car. The car itself does not know it needs a tune-up. The pull to one side feels so natural and normal. The crash into the guardrail of the highway only serves as a mild reminder that something must be wrong, but that something is outside of the car's power to change. The crash comes with a jolt of emotion and anger so strong that everyone around must run for safety or endure emotional distance that threatens their own sense of attachment. Emotional outburst of the complex trauma survivor who has not delved into the work of learning to emotionally regulate is a force in itself. This outburst or avoidance seeks to respond in a way that he or she wished they could have responded long ago when they were being victimized. This outburst does not seek to solve the problem of alignment, but seeks to avoid the cause of the familiar pain that wells up inside. The spouse's attempt to control the wheel in order to prevent the person from crashing is interpreted as another attempt to control, thus inciting the survivor and perpetuating the feeling of being powerless. The spouse lives in constant fear of crashing into the guardrail and develops a hyper-aroused state of their own, a power struggle that takes place in a deep pool of fear where the only hope is to tread water or drown, never to find dry land. The natural attunement of the spouse's nervous system means that they will feel the anxiety, the tension, and the pain of the survivor. They only hope that their partner is able to see the pull of the alignment as the cause of the crash and not something in the environment to place blame on. But they're unable to take personal responsibility because that would require facing the pain. So they transfer blame to you, their partner, their children, or their job. We have been here before, and we know that once they fixate on the object and the environment, they will cease to be able to take responsibility. Our job in their narrative is to accept the blame, to take ownership for their reaction. This has been our reality. They shut down. Even when we do take the blame, nothing makes them feel better. After hours, maybe days, they will come back to normal as if nothing happened, with nothing learned that will help avoid the crash again. No apology offered because in their minds, the reaction was about survival. And in a survival state, all reactions make sense. We sit bewildered, resentful, scared, as if living in a twilight zone. We then reset and can only wait until the next trigger sets off the bomb again. Our world becomes one of waiting, hypervigilance, and anxious anticipation, trying to prevent every previous trigger from happening again, trying to be perfect without losing our sense of self and responsibility, without losing touch with reality. This is what it means to walk on eggshells. Is there any hope? Listen, marriages are made of minimizers and maximizers, avoiders and engagers. The complex trauma survivor is one of these categories, but on steroids. They exist on either end of the continuum. In the event that an explosive outburst happens, it can be likely that the spouse will seek to engage the survivor in trying to talk it out. If that spouse is avoiding, the engagement will only perpetuate the issue and add fuel to the fire. But what are we going to do? How can we tend to our own arousal that feels overwhelming? We tend to double down on our own natural approach, which we ourselves learned in childhood with our own attachment figures. But what worked in childhood is not going to work in our adult relationships. What do we do when they are the one inciting our anxiety but are not receiving our efforts to repair? We begin to float in our own anxiety. We need to disengage at the point when they are losing their shit. This seems counterintuitive. It's scary and uncomfortable, but we aren't solving anything the way we're doing it. We're only existing to be a sponge that is absorbing someone else's trauma, becoming toxic ourselves. So one way or another, we're going to face discomfort. Why do we think that life is about avoiding discomfort? Perhaps the discomfort has something to say to us. Perhaps we are choosing the wrong discomfort and avoiding our own growth. Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. The seemingly irrational response of the survivor stimulates the abandonment or rejection fears of the spouse. A fight ensues, which escalates out of control, with the trauma survivor shutting down or becoming aggressive, while the spouse continues to push. It's at this moment that the argument has no productive purpose. It is in this moment where a mindful spouse can put aside their insecurity and give space to the survivor. Give them what they're demanding. And it's in this space that we are called to sit with our fears and anxiety and not be mastered by them. It's also in this space that we're facing our worst fears and we're engaging in our own work. It can be as simple as forcing oneself to go for a walk or as involved as meditation and prayer. Taking a few minutes to focus on even breath work can work wonders for a spouse who's in distress due to the reaction of a survivor. 5 minutes of time can seem like an eternity when your need to attach is not being met. However, it is as if those 5 minutes you are able to regain perspective and the stress goes down a notch. But disengagement with toxicity is essential, and the space provides potential. It's not a guarantee. After all, the survivor has to own their own stuff. But it is from this refreshed moment that you can attempt to re-engage them. At their core, they believe they're unworthy of attachment, and they set out to prove that belief. Intimacy is actually a painful allergy to them. Intimacy equals vulnerability, and healthy conflict demands vulnerability. If they aren't getting help in redefining their experience in these moments in a trauma-informed way, then there's not much you can do. So what they need most is to be left to themselves and dosed with pursuit. But the pursuit needs to be by a person who is secure enough to not get sucked in. Their rejection of your attempts will be infuriating. However, it is that emotion and sense of rejection that one needs to be mindful about. It may take several days of mindful attempts to fully re-engage the spouse, but that is what they need. And the space to find our own personal security is what we need. They need to be convinced of their value and to not be given up on. They need to experience the reality of unconditional love that empowers and heals. But we need to be free of the codependent trap that we ourselves perpetuate with our engagement in this toxic cycle. All traumatic events are devastating to the victims who endure them, but in most cases, the depth of the injury is made worse by the inability to reconnect with healthy attachment. This is the essence of complex trauma. The survivor is one whose brain developed detached from healthy regulatory attachments and is one who experiences true loneliness. They only heal by regaining the attachment they desperately want but simultaneously reject. And the spouse of the survivor benefits from learning their own regulation skills, a deeper sense of self, and a deeper relationship with God. Partners of survivors are called to love ferociously, but to love from a place of personal security. I'm okay whether you are or not. My peace isn't dependent on you. The growth potential is there for all of us to grab into. Whether your spouse does or does not remains the question. They have to answer for their own stuff and their contribution, but we also have to answer for our own contribution independent of them. And our personal security is that very thing we need to grab onto. We might not fix the relationship, but we will grow, and we might just outgrow the relationship and find that everything worked out the way it was supposed to. So get on that individual path of growth, get some therapy or coaching, and find out exactly what your relationship is telling you about yourself.